about 600 with us, 6 years ago. We had multiple different types of ranking systems. We originally started trying to tie our orgs together because we didn't really know how the governance was going to work. We just wanted people to kind of get to know each other. So it was your ranks were decided on how many orgs you were affiliated with. We then changed that to social activity. We wanted to get the message out there that we were an org, an alliance, and kind of get our presence known. So if you were doing things that increased your standing in the activity level on the RSI website, you also got an org boost or a rank boost. And we have since 2019 changed that to the shares system. We had a podcast, if you guys remember, for about 2 years. Intermittently near the end, but pretty regularly at first. We had an organization directory, which was very bare bones for the time. It was really funny. But it actually eventually turned into a whole org database for all of Star Citizen, which was made by Sabine Wren at the time. Mostly, though, we just hosted game nights, whether it be in Star Citizen or in a third-party game when Star Citizen was either not acting, or not cooperating, or some other flavor of the week game was popular. And there was also a time where we did Org of the Week appreciation posts and made just fun art to pass the time. But the whole time, up until about 2019, we really took the idea seriously of what our ideal government would look like, what we wanted as far as the agency within our own groups, as well as the centralized power that people can create when they coalesce, able to exercise that power in a manner that we could then control. So it was a ongoing about 5-year discussion. We had some nexus points where people got invited to an event where we all participated, but we also kind of had a passive conversation going for all those years. In 2019, 2949, we tried to put that together in a white paper, and it wasn't really, we got 2/3 the way through it, and we realized this was just too much. We're not writing an engineering concept here. It did actually, I preserved the document. It does present our ideas in a very systematic way and shows the sources where what we cited, the things that we wanted, the things we didn't want. So I preserved that document, and it's in your handouts zip file if you're interested in looking at it, but it is very much in the weeds. It essentially was going to culminate with a sort of use case for a cryptocurrency where your voting shares were in a wallet and you vote with that. And even though you couldn't exchange it anywhere, it had no real world value, you could exchange it with others independent of us. And we realized that was just so much extra work. It really wasn't going, it was an interesting path, but we decided to keep it a bit more down to earth after that. And that led to the simplified flow chart that we made originally, which is also a handout available to you in that zip folder with those explanations. We'll get into that in a little bit, and I think this has actually been simplified even further. This is all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes, not necessarily what you guys have to do. So that's a little bit about the history of the last 9 years of what Cognition Corp is up to. As far as gameplay within the verse, most of the things we know are actually pretty old. I've cited everything here, and it's in that document you guys have, but essentially we know orgs are going to have headquarters and shared hangars. Basically, we're all going to be able to pool our assets. We're going to be able to tax. We're going to be able to disperse those funds. We don't know to what degree all of these things are going to happen. These are all very old sources, and we're talking 2014 to 2016 for a lot of these, and they've been pretty much silent ever since. However, we know that we will be able to collect money, control that money based on people's rank within an org, buy assets, hold assets, trade assets as a collective body, and then disperse funds. So how complicated we get with that is really has to do with their tools, which is why we haven't fleshed out a lot of the extra back end system of like our taxes and stuff until we know what tools they're going to give us. There's no sense in making, a very detailed plan and have to rewrite everything. But we're trying to work within that system. So we know since we have voting and we have 6 distinct ranks, we've made 6 ranks, each with a different weight of their vote, for example, because we know that's working within the confines of what they're giving us. We know that NPCs will be able to suppress inter-organization conflict in safe zones, but as anybody may know who has read a little bit of history of EVE Online, they have that in EVE, and it's not fully functional. And if you think about the logistics of Star Citizen, even safe zones will require some group gameplay to prevent ambushing, people who don't care about the consequences of their actions as far as like jail punishment or reputation hits, which are the ways that CIG plans on dealing with this. So that's something you have to think about as far as org cohesion. Your reputation will affect your organizations, and the organization's reputations will affect your reputation. But they did say if you're hidden or redacted when you're in an org, it'll affect it both ways less. So keep that in mind as well. I assume they're going to expand upon that as well. They did say that they want to make spying, subterfuge, all that kind of stuff that you think of from EVE as legitimate gameplay options. So there are going to be ways that they leave ID verification or comms like spying like easy to circumvent or easy to infiltrate in a lot of different ways. So keep that in mind. And then as far as basic administrative tools, we're going to have our own comlink, job board, division and org structure charts, which hopefully we'll be able to set up once the Senate gets established, and then vote functions and fleet viewers. Hey, Trovek, you got a hot mic there.
Oh, my bad.
It's all good. We know that org membership in alpha will persist in a full release, so they're never going to do a wipe or anything on the org systems, which hopefully everybody knows by now, but it's been officially stated. And I have all the sources here if you guys want to reference any of that. I know that none of those are very exact, but as many of you like veterans know, they really pushed the bare minimum of org functionality out and then really haven't spoken about it since. So that's kind of what we're working with. So think about people and orgs that are really, really, really highly structured right now. There's going to be a period of rewrite for many of these orgs because they went too far too fast with their organization. So we tried to keep that in mind too when we were kind of constructing this back end of our political body, working within the confines of what we have, knowing that much of it will change. So as far as org gameplay in reality, right now we have the Stanton system. So it has 4 planets, 8 moons. It's about 5 light years across. Considering what you know about gameplay, think about it in terms of travel, personnel, and resource allocation when you want to hold, like grow, maintain political dominance over an area, which is what orgs do, whether that's business, like symbiosis with other orgs, military dominance, all those kind of things. We know we're getting Pyro here pretty soon, quite a bit larger, most of it empty. But to give you perspective, with those same issues, you have a space much, much larger than Stanton. All of Stanton fits within that small ring of Pyro. And then in addition to that, we know Pyro and Stanton are going to be connected to multiple other systems, which will hopefully be coming online not terribly long after we get these initial systems. And the full execution should look like a gigantic map of hundreds of systems, all spread across this network. The difficult part for any centralized body or political, something that people unite under, how do you maintain cohesion? That's always the question. This is something that people overlook because the size of gameplay that we have right now is so small. But you have to factor it by time, space, resource allocation. It's going to be a tremendous logistical nightmare. So think about it in terms of this entire map, in terms of a macrocosm of what we currently have. So basically, I want to put it in a model of these two terms. Now, you may hear other people characterize this differently, but I think of things as either conscious or environmental forces. You have force itself, which is the ability for an authority to make others do what they otherwise might, not do. That's how we're defining it here. And then friction is the logistical resistances in an environment to the application of that force. So the things you consciously want to make others do that they might otherwise not do, that would be the organizations that are against us, and then the friction of applying that force. Uh, we can think of so far, and if you guys have any other ideas, we can brainstorm this, but the four major categories that we thought of were location for the organization, the reputation between political bodies in that area, the actual time zones in reality that people have to play, and then people's own specializations and professions. You can think of them along a spectrum where some things exert a lot of friction and certain things exert very little friction. So location is probably, and reputation are going to be probably the strongest points of friction. Because location, just the amount of time, think about the amount of time it takes for you to travel across Stanton. Now connect Stanton to Pyro, then you have to jump 5 more systems to go aid someone or to invade another group and refuel and resupply on the way there. There's these logistical friction points to the application of any organization's force. Reputation will also affect that because if you have to go through areas that are hostile to you, that could add to friction, or it could ease friction by having things that are friendly to you. I think we should expect people to have alt accounts to circumvent both of these. Because having a totally separate character can allow you to kind of like jump in and out instantly through these problems. But nonetheless, it'll stay a main sticking point of friction for the actual gameplay itself. Time zones, as we know from Eve, becomes part of the metagame. You always want to attack or apply force when someone's, their own logistical friction is the highest, which would be the time zone where most of them are asleep. And then the least friction would be professions, just because in a large org, you have a lot more resources allotted to you. So you can be in a more diverse function than you would on your own. And then people will probably end up learning most things and how to become proficient in most things. So instead of thinking of it as, oh, we should divide people by profession, think of instead the highest friction is going to cause the most division between orgs and networks. So that's going to be where people want to play the game and what kind of political reputation they want to play the game as, whether that's pro UEE or pro whatever forces are in that area. Time zone will then probably be a medium friction. That's dependent upon a personal preference. So that's really the long and short of what we know about org gameplay. The very end of it being kind of nebulous models and concepts, whereas I try to be more specific in the beginning. And that's really all we know right now. And of course, if you guys want to add to it, please let me know. This first presentation is probably going to have a lot of changes to it after the Q&A session, where you guys can hit me with some input on things I may have missed or perspectives I could expand upon. So next I want to go into the Cognition Corp government. So if you guys have any questions, please just write them down and I'll try to address them at the end. I tried to anticipate as many questions as I could, but I'm sure I either stopped short of some people's expectations on answers or didn't quite think of the question to answer correctly. So feel free to let me know. So we're going to work a little bit backwards, how I normally have modeled it for you guys. We're going to talk about how the system itself functions, the actual end goal function, and then work backward on how the consensus comes. So essentially, members from our general membership pool are chosen by a leadership body to do certain functions. They either do something that's novel, or they do something that is has a strong SOP in place, and that would be the strong SOP would be an operation, because we know that there's a standard operating procedure, or they're doing something novel, and that's a project. We should divide those two because they require two totally different skill sets. But essentially, what I'm saying is we get any individual, could be a flat, complete structure, could be a rank 0 person, could be a high rank person, someone who wants to do the job and is chosen by that leadership body, gets a certain amount of resources and a time window to accomplish certain goals. They will have complete decision-making power over the small narrow set of responsibilities they have within that time period, um, just to make sure that there's as little administrative overhead as possible and micromanagement. We want to avoid micromanagement. And with the distant locations, reputation systems, everyone's skill sets are going to be needed, and what you're doing may not comport to what other people understand of what you should be doing. So we want autonomy, and we really want to measure people by results. The leadership itself that chooses this group is a small Senate body where everyone gets one vote. The first Senate or leadership body that we get is really going to be the most important in setting precedents. So these people will set our priorities as an organization, our strategy, and strategic goals. And more than anything, they will set the precedent on how business should be conducted. This system that we have in place right now is just enough to get a body together to make decisions. How those decisions are defined as like a routine and administrative process is going to be decided by this group. Yep, Ray, a really good point. He wanted me to elaborate that as a reminder, this is going to be a skeleton framework. Details are meant to be evolving and implemented within a voting body so that we can build upon this as new information comes and everybody can participate in that process, even if they didn't participate in the original uh, establishment of the whole skeleton itself. So basically, it's the bare minimum we need just to make decisions. And then everybody here and among the organization that's there at the time, they get say in how things are fleshed out. I want to get a screen cap of everybody here. Sorry for the pause. Cool. So the way that we then have a check and balance on that small group is that they are beholden to the voting body of the general membership. That general membership is capable of taking those leadership roles away just as easily as they are to give them. So, but the way that we get which leaders to be chosen is based on the orgs themselves. So the power itself rests on the general voters. The orgs themselves are then given the power, and the orgs nominate one person to represent their ideas and their priorities, and each of those people comprise the Senate. Where the place that organizations would go to register for the Senate is on this webpage here. I've included the link, and it's on Spectrum. I haven't really ever pushed this, so some of you may not be aware it's there. But if you ever want to participate in the Senate, an org just needs to register there and just basically say, yes, we want to participate in the government, and that's it. What I would honestly say is works best is use it as an advertising platform for your organization. This is supposed to be where if new members want to join an organization, they can get to know you. Or if they're deciding who to vote for, this is kind of what they're going to establish that vote upon if they've never interacted with you before. So essentially, the orgs all register on this list. They are given a score by the members when they vote. And the ones that have the highest approval rating get to nominate somebody for the Senate. The cutoff point is going to be pretty strict. It's 37% based on 1/E, which is the statistical shorthand for a good population sample. This number could change if we end up needing to, but we want to keep it fairly competitive. Not everyone who applies for the Senate should be able to join the Senate, and it shouldn't be so prohibitive that only the absolute top should get in. So about a little over 1/3. The approval score is also going to be weighted. So we're going to take out of all the organizations that sign up to want to participate, their number of main members are counted, And if you are 2 standard deviations away from that median, um, your score essentially gets weighted less, and you need more approval votes than not. So that way, it stops 2 separate attacks on our government. One being if, say, Test wanted to get a bunch of uh, votes, they would actually have to have a proportionate number of their members join, get shares, and then vote for their org, because their numbers would be so high. Even if, say, several hundred of them joined Cognition Corp and voted for that org, their numbers would be so proportionally reduced they may not meet that 37% cutoff point. Additionally, if you have a moderately large org, say like 500 members, and the median is, um, 50, they wouldn't be able to break themselves into 500 small orgs, vote for themselves, and then have themselves create 100% of the Senate. So there's that basically avoids large orgs gaming our systems from 2 different attacks. And as you know, the weighted voting is how individual members participate. Um, as you participate in Cognition Corp, you get a certain amount of votes, and then however high your ranking is and the number of votes owned by you as a member versus other members, that gives you a higher rank and thus more weight when you vote for these orgs to go join the Senate. Essentially, it's top 5%. You guys have seen all this, should be on the front page. If you want to review it in detail, let me know. But I don't want to be too redundant. But essentially, we've spread out power so that there are, 6 distinct ranks for voters. The voting process is actually extremely simple. What an individual member would have to do is just provide a list of organizations they approve of. And it can be done in any manner. We can have it be a raw list where the person has to write in every org they want to approve of, or we could do it and we provide a list. And there are arguments for either way. I think when we're first starting out, we're going to provide a list because everyone's getting to know each other. Once the organization and governance system is established, we would then probably leave it to a blank where everybody would have to fill in the names that they approve of. So I know that this whole system sounds a little bit complicated, and I don't want to tell anybody they shouldn't learn exactly how it works in detail. But the same way that, you don't need to know how your car necessarily works. You don't need to necessarily know how your television functions. You just need to know how to work that device. In the same way, we want the functioning of the organization to be very easy, but we want the detailed back end to be transparent. So if any of you want to know exactly how the calculations are done, we're going to be publishing everything in spreadsheets. We're going to be publishing exactly how the calculations are done. Everything is going to be completely transparent. So if you want to know how the exact way the engine runs and to criticize that engine, you have the ability to do so. But the average person, all they need to do is just tell us a list of organizations that they approve of. Basically, the back end of the compromise of having such a complicated system is that we've agreed that you need to build in a baked-in respect for people's time commitments, because there's only so much that people wanted. And it's actually the reason why we have not done a traditional pure democracy, because everyone would have to stay up on everything. If instead you're voting for the reputation of the organizations, you only have to vaguely stay up on the political landscape to have a nuanced respect for how it's going on. So the ballot type could be a couple different types. I mentioned before, you can have a blank that you fill in. You can do a yes or no, fill in the dot or not fill in the dot, as well as the yes and no for that. Essentially, we want to make it as simple as possible. But I actually want to make it even simpler than that. We're also going to have delegate voting. So if you as a person say, hey, I just don't care about this political process, we don't want to punish you for that. You're here to play the game. So in addition to voting on the reputation of other orgs, you could actually say, I trust this other member's reputation. I know that they make nuanced decisions. I trust their votes. I nominate my votes to go to that person. And so instead of having to know the nuance of all these different orgs, we say maybe once a year, have to renew that, yes, I trust this other individual who's a member of Cognition Corp to do all the correct voting for me. And thereby freeing up your time to both reap any benefits from the voting process, where yes, your voice is still being heard, but your time is completely dedicated to the game itself. So right now, the way the landscape works, you have 600 total shares that anybody could have earned over the last 9 years. Within that, the top 5% are about up to from about 550 to 600, and then kind of a descending amount of shares from that point for different ranks. As of March 3rd, 2023, with the next distribution event being March 3rd, 2025, here is a distribution of how many members own how many shares. With the blue being current members as of that date, red being ex-members as of that date. Only members have ever earned shares. So we've had a lot of members cycle out, but they've mainly been lower ranking members. The reason why I want to include them, though, is that you never lose your shares for quitting. If you step away from the organization, we want to ensure that even though this is going to be one of the largest, if not the largest organization in Star Citizen eventually, everything you do to contribute to it is yours. You should be able to walk away from the table with things that you earned. And I think we're going to be the only organization dedicated to that concept, at least at the scale that we're working on. So in addition to the number of shares and people with those numbers of shares, this is the voting weight that those people have. Again, blue is current members, red is ex-members. You can actually compare the two, so you can see how weighted voting actually affects it. So you've got the top 3 ranks really controlling the dialogue because they also have the most investment and largest stake within the organization. However, the inflation rate changes who those people are over time, depending on if they're doing things that are pro-social and approved of by the organization. So if we count just current members and their vote weight, this is what the current chart looks like, with, even though the unranked members have such a small amount, it's because there's actually proportion more people who end up joining for a while and then leaving, who earn those smaller share amounts. So that leaves us to the idea of, since you own your own shares, we don't want it to then be you're stuck with them. You should be able to recoup that amount if you, say, want to completely wash your hands of the situation. Say it's 5-10 years from now, leadership's changed, you really just don't like the direction it's going, or say they take the wrong view on a war that you dislike and you don't want to wait around for political change to fix that. You should be allowed to do whatever you want with those shares. So we will eventually allow members to send to other members any amount of shares they want, and they should be able to independently exchange that for anything. If we can facilitate the buying and selling through CIG, I would like to do that. Don't know if that's ever going to happen, but at the very least, we will commit to allowing for people to change who owns what shares on their own, and then they can negotiate the prices for that. We will always keep generation of new shares within the organization. So even though there's going to be some selling, I'm sure, they'll always come from people who are still a part of our organization. We're not going to be giving them out to non-members. Essentially, we expect value of those shares, and the reason why people would not want to sell them, to accrue from 2 main avenues. The political capital gained through holding a higher amount, that's the extra voting weight that you generate, as well as dividends that are paid out per share. So while we do cap your political power, if you earn a certain amount, say you own 1% of all the shares that have ever been generated, you don't get 1% of the political vote. You still are only a rank 5 and have 6 vote weight. You actually have not been capped on income. So say we do a dividend payout, you own 1% of the shares, you get 1% of that dividend. So that way there's still a financial incentive for people to gain shares beyond that initial political capital. Another thing that we want to promote is that the reputation system is expected to be very um, demanding and cause a lot of friction. We want our shares to be able to work as a way around that friction. If you're on the legal side and you have, say, you want to trade with a pirate organization, if you exchange goods directly in the universe, it could affect both of your guys' reputations negatively from the way that you want it, making you both more toward neutral. However, if you have someone arrange a drop off and you say, I will pay you in shares, and we just bookend it on our side, you may be able to completely circumvent the reputation system, thereby facilitating the value generation itself through also facilitating a way around the reputation system in game. This actually brings me to another thing that is submitted by Rhaegar, so appreciate for the source on this. I really highly recommend you guys watch that video. We're essentially adopting in totality the Norwegian model for logistics of growing an economy. And I know that sounds a little funny, but it's well, there's a lot of things we have in common with the way that the Norwegian economy formed. We are disparate but connected autonomous communities that are building a united political foundation. We are emphasizing a fair distribution with transparent democracy. And then we're going to nationalize the resources we get coupled with the ownership shares. And then when the reputation system comes online and people have multiple um, localities to exist within, your shares that are accruing wealth and then paying out in dividends will actually be an investment in all different areas that people are contributing to Cognition Corp, as well as all different professions, which then kind of acts as like a savings account or a sovereign wealth fund among people who would normally not be sharing resources. But yeah, I do recommend the video. The video is about 45 minutes, but it's definitely worth your time, especially the first like 15 minutes of it. It's very, very good. So as a stopgap at the very end of our political system is this mediating force of the market itself. If the political body becomes so toxic that people just can't say there's just something that's wrong and people are not addressing it, the values from people selling will drop over time. We may not be able to see that value drop if we're not actually facilitating a market, but people's ability to satisfy the amount of shares available to sell with buying power will diminish, and people intuitively understand that over time. But what that does, it allows for anyone who says, okay, I actually believe in the system itself and can enact change, to go in and buy more shares, and centralizing it temporarily in a way that allows for change to then occur. So it is the like final backstop politically if the sort of the managers that are dictators of their own little area aren't functioning right, because the Senate is not really functioning right, because the voting body hasn't been acting right. You actually have this market backdrop, which would then incentivize people who want to change or basically to repair the system to buy into it by having the shares plummet in price, which doesn't sound like a good thing, but in the end could be. As faith in the organization then increases, people will be less likely to sell or even more likely to continue buying, thereby actually making that centralization force hard and reducing the possibility of changing. The system itself has been laid out in this flowchart, which I actually think I've been kind of feeding you snippets of throughout. This is also included in that zip file that I posted. This, I think, kind of gives the best snapshot of how the whole system works from top to bottom. We went from bottom to top. But each layer is a form of accountability, which allows for centralized control through those managers and little mini dictators. A small Senate body that can make decisions, but there are already people who have dedicated themselves to being basically invested enough to want to know the minutia of how everything is going to work, and then be held accountable by the voters who just need to know people's organization that they're in and the reputation that organization has to then vote for those. And at the very end, if none of that is functioning correctly, you have the marketplace itself. So the marketplace would be anarcho-capitalism, essentially. You have a weighted democracy above that. You have a republic of sort of the chosen small like minority, and then specialized dictators with very strict limits, all cascading as different forms of accountability within an organization that requires very minimal input from the average member. Right now, the way that the distribution is set up, you can see that, say, it was first 3 years, then 2 years, we've been doing a distribution of about 200 shares to the max, about 30-ish shares at least. The number of shareholders did go up, but it's plateaued for a while. And then the average ownership has been going slightly down. With each one. So it seems like it's centralizing a little bit, but not actually too much. Difference between 0.035% and 0.031%. But more than anything, what this tells me is that the system is designed very well to flatten the structure. So anyway, that was the long-winded portion of how the government works. Very quickly, I want to go over earning shares and then just on the nearest horizon for the future of the organization itself. We've always touted pro-social behavior as what we wanted to give and reward people for as like forms of ownership of the organization. Up until about 2023, 2953, Star Citizen was not really in a reliable enough state to expect people to want to play regularly. We would all get really hyped with a new patch. We'd all play for about a week, and then either we would run out of things to do, or the organization or the game itself would break with another update. It just was not reliable. So we really just relegated activity to what we did in our Discord. So if you want to share this with anybody, the QR codes, just send people to our Discord. Now that the game is in a more reliable state, we have pivoted to measuring activity where people are doing things in game. Right now, it's still just, okay, are you being social in the game? But it's shifted from being social in the game, and then as soon as we're allowed to, measuring activity with what you do in the game for the organization itself. So there are two main avenues for contributing to org prosperity. Either just taxation itself, or community task bounties, which are essentially predefined things that we need done, which are hard to quantify, but are easy to qualify. And therefore we set aside certain amount of shares that you could earn just for completing those bounties, separately from taxation. Ideally, taxation will always be voluntary. So what we would do is we would say, okay, in the month of April, there's going to be, 15,000 shares that are generated. The people who submit taxes to us get those shares in proportion of how much money in taxes they submit, essentially creating a blind auction system and making taxes voluntary. That way that we don't impose a tax broad system that hurts people in areas that can't afford it and then rewards people in areas that have abundance. This sort of always creates an incentive to contribute as much as you reasonably think you can. However, they have not told us that this system will work. They have only told us that, yes, you'll be able to tax your members. So in the event that we can't create a blind auction system, which is the ideal, what we'll do is have the Senate set the taxation rate, and people, if they don't like it, can then vote the Senate out. The task bounties have a specific amount of shares that we set aside for them. That will be tied to the inflation rate. So we know there's going to be a maximum inflation rate for shares. It's going to diminish over time, probably be pretty high in the first 3 to 5 years, and then diminish quite a bit after that, and then a long tail. But the community task bounties will be a part of that inflation rate, just carved out, the rest going to taxation. We're actually going to be starting trialing this community task bounty system now with bounties that we are going to be making in the Discord and on Spectrum to help prepare and train people in our organization to how to start out and then how to specialize and master the systems that are currently in place. So the rules for it being that we're going to they're going to make a post about a certain task that needs to be done within a certain time window. Anybody can submit work to satisfy that task. All the submissions will be evaluated by a review team that has oversight. And then they're going to give credit based on the quality of the work and the order of submission. So if somebody has all the information that somebody needs to satisfy a question, but it's just not set up in an aesthetically pleasing way, or it's not organized correctly, or it's just the bullet points and hasn't been written out, we'll give partial credit for people who write it out and format it correctly and all that kind of stuff. We eventually want people to be able to contribute to a knowledge compendium that the whole organization has made and contributed to. And then, in addition to satisfying the individual bounties for your contribution toward that, if the information is still up to date and has not been expanded or improved by anybody else, you'll actually earn an accrued interest of more shares over time on that bounty. That way, we can ensure that the information always stays up to date. So, for example, say we had a salvage professions guide. We would want several SOPs that people could read and be like, okay, if I have this circumstance, this is exactly how I would do it. These are what the concepts mean, maybe even providing pictures for things that elaborate upon it. We would say, okay, this is just an example. Arbitrarily, we've said, let's say there's 600 shares available to this, because that's how much one person could have earned over the last 9 years of work with the organization. We're going to put all that toward someone writing these guides. We would break up how many shares you could earn based on the operator size, handheld, vulture, or reclaimer SOP of these different values. Then we would say, okay, not just solo work. How would you then set it up an SOP for multiple people? Ideally, what's your ideal fleet size, or excuse me, for full crew for that one ship? And then, okay, what's your ideal fleet? And then describing all of that. And then people who describe different versions of this that are still valid but may disagree on certain, efficiencies, but they're still both valid, they will get partial credit for that as well. So in summation, the immediate future of Cognition Corp, there's just three main variables I really want to stress. We are maintaining a fair distribution for our shares. That is a pillar of what we are building our community on. We want to maintain flat structure, and as well as make sure that people who make contributions are fairly rewarded. We want to build value generation into those shares and make them desired, and reward you in some way for your contributions over time, and in ways that you may not expect. Monetarily and payouts and dividends, that's super easy. We want to compound upon that and build and make more things that are more valuable for you. And we want to initiate the Senate as soon as it is possible. I actually am thinking that we can see the Senate sooner rather than later, because all we really need are the ability to make a poll in Spectrum and the ability for you guys to vote on it, and then to differentiate which voters serve what ranks, and we're off to the races. We're good to go from that point forward. And from that, I really don't have any else. Do you guys have any questions?
Rygar would like to chime in when.
Yes.
So up one slide. You gave an example here as far as 600 shares. Would that be a value determined by the project level or at a Senate level? Are you thinking?
This would probably be, at the moment, a moderator decision based on consensus of what we think is proportionate for total outstanding shares. I plan on submitting something to that right now. Basically, I should preface this by saying moderators won't be given privileged positions in our government. However, moderators have shown a long history of helping this community grow, and I would like to continue that by saying moderators will be the judges of how the system works, and will have to sit out anything that they have conflicting interests on. So they're going to be continuing decisions where we need to figure out how the complexity of these systems work in real life. So the value of these shares will be decided by a small group of moderators right now. Hopefully that system will grow. Eventually, when we have precedents, those will just be baked into the system, and we know this much is how much each of these would be worth. I'm submitting something soon that's going to be showing how much I think I'm proposing for each of these, and it's less than like 3% inflation from what we currently have, and I think the numbers are reasonable. But I want to decide that as a group, and then we should present that to um, people within the organization. And if there's not widespread disagreement, I think that's the way we're going to go. I want to work myself away from centralized control, but we're still in a place where we kind of need that. Moderators have been here the longest and have shown a lot of allowance for input from the community. So I don't think that we're going to have any issues with making sure it's representative of what people want. Any other questions?
I'm actually surprised I followed it as well as I did, though.
Apologies. I know this first time was a little janky. It's the
No,
first
no,
time me
nothing
going
on
over
you.
it.
That's just me and my political mind.
No, totally. But I want to do this on a regular basis because I want people to become very familiarized with what the plan is, and because if there are any widespread disagreements or ways that we could tweak this, I want us to be able to discuss that now. It's much easier to make sure that everybody's on the same page and in agreement before something actually gets set up. Now, granted, we have 9 years of baggage and history, and everybody kind of comes in and out of the social platform, but nonetheless, um, this group has been really, really positive. And I'm glad to see how many constructive people there are, and I'm not afraid of, disagreeing and coming to terms with, okay, how do we balance all of our different priorities? So more transparency on this is good. More honesty in disagreements is good. I encourage people to sort of let me know what their thoughts are, and I'm excited for the next couple years of Star Citizen. I think it's going to be the most exciting that we've seen in its entire history so far.
One highlight that I want to make tied to all of this is as we get new people that are find interest and engagement. I realize that we've got a ton of time here, but if we were to jump into a real system and we were to have people voting for people in their communities to represent them, there's no guarantee that they would have a good grasp of this as they come in, like what's already been put into place.
Yep, that's true. I think once we're holding regular elections, because this voting system is going to be it's going to be ongoing. So when you're voting, you don't just vote once and then you're locked in. If you disagree with your prior vote, you can change it at any time, and then it'll sort of be counted and resolved, let's say monthly, and then the members of the Senate will be updated. Once people see that in action, it'll be much easier for them to adopt, oh, okay, these are the how everything operates. But you're not wrong. Until we get that going, I'm probably just going to have to maintain these and making sure we include people, even people who have been here for a while. I don't expect them to have necessarily paid attention, so that's going to be on me. But I'm more than happy to do this every weekend if I need to do it for one or two people at a time, until we make sure that everybody's informed and everybody's had their voice heard, and we're all on the same page. Because I also want to make sure that everybody understands how important the first Senate is going to be. And even myself, I'm actually going to be somewhat stepping down from a leadership position, and I want the Senate to sort of form. And create a leadership position of itself. If the Senate decides they need a speaker, they should vote for a speaker, and that should be the head of the Senate, and then driving discussion in it or something like that. Or if they want to make it more of a roundtable, I want that, and so I am pushing for the Senate to be created sooner rather than later because of that, and that I think will become a natural outlet. It'll be much more obvious about how the whole system works once we're all participating in it.
And less weight on your shoulders because you do a lot.
Well, I imagine there's going to be a lot of administrative work,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to do it. But yeah, at the same time, I think some people have held back because they don't want to impose, and I feel like creating an official, authoritative body that gives people the ability to lose those preconceptions and participate fully because they know, okay, I've been given the voice of the community, I've earned the ability to be here. I think there's a lot of humble people in this organization that could be contributing more, and that's really all it is that I don't think everybody's been given the position yet to participate, and this is one of those avenues. Was there anything I could elaborate on? Does anybody feel confused about any of it? Could I have improved the talk at all in any way? I'm happy to field any questions or take any criticisms.
Where are the eggs?
For Easter, I've hidden them.
Yeah,
They're in the
where
slides.
have you hidden them? Do I need to do we have a map of some sort? Any riddles that I can solve?
No, unfortunately, no riddles this time.
Damn it.
Black and thrown into space.
Do we have
Okay.
to start a corporation in order to participate in government?
So, long and short of that is yes. However, that's only if you want to be in the Senate, and it does not matter if you want to create a one-person org. It will affect your distance from the median, so you would need more approval. But it also makes you valuable to orgs that do not yet have anyone that's a shareholder that would be able to represent them. So I want it to work as a way to not only increase the value of orgs, because then you would want to be in an org that has a good reputation with the Senate, but if you are someone that has a good reputation in the community, you are now a commodity for orgs to sort of headhunt for you, because they want someone that has a good reputation in our community in their org. But the long and short of it is that organizations are going to be one of the only ways that people can affect the in-game universe, and we need to kind of reflect that in our organization structure. But hopefully that's balanced by how much of the power is actually rested in the democracy itself.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, did I answer it all the way to your satisfaction, or?
Yes.
Okay.
I've got an expansion to that.
Mhm.
As far as members of the Senate, I know at one point you had mentioned certain people who are engaged in cognition at certain levels need to be primary members of cognition. Once we start building the Senate, would you want that membership of cognition to be an important factor in that, or would an affiliate status be okay?
In my mind, and this is something that I think we can decide as a group, but in my mind, if RSI gives us the tools to where you don't need to be a main member, we shouldn't enforce that. But if you need main member status to just do something on the back end with the Senate, and that's just a part of your duties to be that representative, then you might need to be a main member. But I would like to create as little friction between people participating in the Senate or not as possible. And I don't want to require that for people, because I also know that when the Senate first starts out, people are going to be drawn to a lot of different sources and political alliances and political bodies. I want to give people as much freedom and as little friction as possible. And so I think main org status should only be reserved insofar that RSI restricts those people from doing their senatorial duties, whatever those are. And if it's just commenting on a forum and voting in Senate votes, let them be affiliates.
That was my impression as well, but this way, we can kind of make sure that we're all on the same page as far as that's concerned.
Sure. No, yeah. Yeah, also I'm willing to hear if anybody has a good argument as to why they should be main. I think that should be discussed. But right now, I think logistically, there's no reason to enforce that. As far as I'm concerned, the orgs are going to be nominating their representative to the Senate however they want. That was another reason why we want people voting for orgs, is that allows an organization to take the burden of the boon of whatever the results of that person's reputations are, and it allows people to organize themselves. In their small groups, we're not telling them how they need to structure themselves. We just say, just choose a person. If that person's going to be their leader and their leader wants to use that time to be in the Senate, go for it. I would probably recommend having someone who's below the leadership level who can take on the responsibilities of legislation, which is going to be a lot. And the reason is the whole reason we are not doing a full democracy is because the amount of time it takes to dedicate to dealing with political alliances and rules and all that stuff. It's not for everybody. So we should let people decide that however they want.
Yeah, I agree.
I do recommend people listen to that Empires of Eve Volume 2. It summarizes Empires of Eve Volume 1 in the first chapter, so if you have not read that, it'll catch you up to speed. It deals with Eve in the era right before Star Citizen went into pledge, like on Kickstarter. So, like right before they were starting everything. So it catches you up on what everyone knew and what Chris Roberts was even commenting on as a foundational part of organizations, because they have not discussed organizations for so long. It was honestly very educational if you're not familiar with Eve. If you're familiar with Eve, it's redundant. You probably already know everything. Looking at Unifarian.
Yeah, uh-huh. I've actually listened to that exact file, so
Yeah, it's a great one. It's really good.
it is. It is. It's really well done. And I agree with you on the summary of Volume 1. If you listen to that one, there's no reason to go back after Volume 1. It
Yeah.
does summarize it very well.
Mm-hmm. If you really like Volume 2, you can go back to Volume 1 and it'll fill in with extra details, but I don't think it's necessary. Yeah, so and in accordance with all this, I think I will be sort of stepping down a bit and trying to let the community define Cognition Corp more from this point forward. Maybe I'll probably still end up doing the administrative, like shares, like calculations and stuff. I'll still make that transparent. But I kind of want to get us into a mode of getting to know our own leadership styles and forming into organizations. I'm going to be making my own organization as well, and posting that in that forum area, and recruiting from the general body as well. Although I think I'll still do invites for Cognition Corp. I'll still solely take that on unless anybody else wants to become a main member and help. I don't mind doing that. But I like the idea of keeping Cognition Corp the sort of spam invite that allows people to come into the community and then allows organizations to recruit from that community selectively.
Is your future organization going to be revolved around racing?
No, actually, originally yes, but no, it's going to be mainly just about security and like support positions.
Okay.
So
I love
I
support
will be
roles.
contracting you.
So yeah, I'm personally probably once they have the fleet viewer, I'm going to leave all of my logistics stuff with Cognition Corp probably, and then my military stuff will probably be with my security org. Although they're still flimsy on details regarding that as well. But I'm assuming we're going to be able to pledge stuff to the organization. But yeah, if anybody thinks of any other questions, feel free to reach out via DM or put them in the chat. Either one works. I'm happy that as many people made it out to this. But I don't know what questions you may have, because again, this is the first time me running it. And also, the YouTube link that Rhaegar gave, really do recommend watching that. It puts the concept of what we're doing analogously into real history extremely well, and I think rationalizes a lot of our decisions with real world examples. In fact, I'll throw that link in chat.
I mean, if you're looking for feedback, I think that it was very well done, and I know myself probably go over it again and absorb it a little bit.
Sure.
Maybe have questions later, but overall, I thought it was pretty clear to follow and understand. So
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I agree.
And I absolutely know that there's more people, at least in my community, that are going to be interested in this kind of stuff. It's just as
Sure.
we, start firming up the concept of this umbrella, like we're going to see more engagement from other communities, and that frequency, quarterly, monthly, whatever we had it set as, I don't
Sure.
recall, but we're going to see more activity pick up on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There's the YouTube post, and then here's the forum post. So for anybody, I think like Nefarian, if you don't have your org submitted yet, that's where you should do it. Make
Okay.
sure that you have your org in there. That's going to be the pool from which we draw candidates, and that everyone's going to be voting on. In addition to making sure everybody knows who you are and what org you're in, and establishing friendly relationships. I'm going to be transparent. The best way to do it is also to recruit from inside the Cognition Corp itself, and recruit from outside and have those people try to join Cognition. It's supposed to be a symbiotic feedback loop for both groups, where everybody's kind of both recruiting for themselves and for the larger group. And so I've hoped that blind, like cold calling people for Cognition is beneficial for you guys, because it creates a pool for you to draw from. And if you're wanting to participate in the Senate, but you don't know who to align yourself with, or if you're not sure if you want to make your own org, just ask around and see what other organizations are interested in Cognition Corp or friendly with us, but maybe they haven't chosen a Senate representative. And if you get along with those people, that would be a great strategy. Oh, and creating event nights. You can brand the event nights for your own organization as well. And you can still have all of the members. I'm keeping track of everyone who participates. Only people who are part of Cognition Corp on March 3rd, 2025 are going to end up getting shares for those. But if your members are on the fence or whatever, I still record them in the list. So they've got time to figure out whether or not they want to join.
Hey, I'm going to use the fight night we just had as a example. I didn't participate in the actual fight night, but I was there for it. Was that
I think you were counted. Let me see.
okay?
That was, what evening was that? It was Friday, right?
I believe
Yeah.
so.
So 29th.
I was there in spirit, but that's about it.
Well, that was my question. Is does that to y'all count as involving yourself?
Yeah, if you're in the chat with us, even if you're not playing, I don't see you on here though. Did I miss you? I see you afterwards.
He was definitely on there with us.
Okay, so you know what? I've got the last Friday night fight ones with the event after that with so yeah, you are in that last one. I just mixed the two. I'm sorry. Thank you for saying something. I'll add you right there.
I'm just curious how it's all working out. I'm just here to salvage in mine, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure you get credit for your activity. And yeah, that's how we're counting it right now. It's just, are you in the chat and being active? You get 1 point for just being present during an event. I've been very loose with the definition of events. We originally said, it's going to be if you make an event and then if more than one person shows up, as long as someone takes a picture of it, that's good enough. I've actually been adding, if you guys just make your own ad hoc social events and people show up. So we may have to restrict that. If we get to the point where there's pretty much 24-hour activity, we'll change that back to official events only. But until then, I want to incentivize people to participate in chat here and continue that. But yeah, 1 point for being present at any social event, 2 points if you're streaming or if you posted an event and hosted it, and even if you didn't stream. But streaming, I've found that it helps other people, especially strangers, jump in if they don't really know anybody yet, because it demonstrates already what you're doing.
Yeah, I've been away for about a month, but it seems like activity's been pretty consistent even through the traditional work week.
Yeah, yeah. No, people have been killing it lately. I've been really been enjoying how much people have been putting into it and using this as a social staging area. Did you guys want a game? Run some missions or anything, or run some acclaimers while everyone's here?
Oh, I'm always good for reclaimers.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm down. I'm gonna
Cool.
and then another 15 minutes, and then I'll be ready.
Yep, no worries.
Okay.
What
The hell is
happened?
going on? I jumped in the claw seat on my reclaimer and I've got an error message flashing.
Oh, I've never seen that.
No, there we go.